To win in fantasy football, you want that running back who can lead the way, a guy who's an RB1 for his team and your team. Why are these players being taken so late then? These are some of the cheapest RB1s, the guys who are starting running backs in the NFL, and yet you can get them right now outside of pick 60 in fantasy drafts. We're going to decide, are they worth investing in, or are they going late for a reason?
Now, if you're thinking, how can you be drafting? Well, then you need to check out Underdog Fantasy. Underdog Fantasy has best ball drafts going full swing right now, all the way up until the season. They have drafts ranging from $4 to $500 with prize pools ranging from $100,000 to $15 million. That's right, $15 million in their flagship Best Ball Mania 5. If you haven't tried Underdog Fantasy yet, this is the time to do it. Just make sure when you sign up, you use our promo code ENDGAME and take advantage of this special offer. They're going to give you a special pick plus up to $250 in bonus cash. Go to UnderdogFantasy.com, sign up using promo code ENDGAME, start drafting right now, and take advantage of this special offer.
Let's start with Joe Mixon. We all know him from his days with the Cincinnati Bengals, but now he's in Houston. Is this change of scenery going to benefit him? Or is this going to be the last of his days as a fantasy RB1? So, Chris, why is he going this late, and what is his actual upside?
I think the reason why he's going this late is just because he's Joe Mixon. Like, we've seen this guy for years and years. He's not super exciting. He's not some young, second-year running back like Devon Achane or Jahmyr Gibbs. I just think it's kind of like, oh, yeah, Joe Mixon, boring Joe Mixon. But he was an RB1 last year. I mean, basically just because he didn't get hurt and he had some spike weeks, but also because he was in such a good offense with Cincinnati. Although, of course, once Joe Burrow got hurt, they weren't that good of an offense. But that's kind of what he's been known for, right? Is like not a super efficient running back, not a super exciting running back, but always in this great offense, and he could put up fantasy points. Well, he's in Houston now. They might be an even better offense in Cincinnati this year. So, yeah, for me, I think Joe Mixon does have RB1 upside. I mean, we're talking about by the end of the season, could Joe Mixon be a top 12 fantasy running back? I don't see why not.
Well, I've been skeptical of Mixon the last couple of years, and that was still when he was in that Cincinnati offense. I'm always a little nervous about a running back changing teams, and I know we don't think that there's much competition there because Dameon Pierce was awful last year and lost his job to Devin Singletary, but he's still there. He's still going to be someone involved, and I just think that maybe his days as a workhorse might be over, and also it's just going to be a pass-friendly offense because C.J. Stroud, they added Stephon Diggs, already have Nico and Tank Dell. I wonder if the volume ticks down for him. I do think that he's got tremendous touchdown upside. If he's used as a prolific pass catcher, then that will definitely help. But I feel like his ceiling is as a volume-dependent low-end RB1. So he's kind of a fallback option for me. I think that's the best-case scenario. So I'm kind of like you said, I'm not too excited about Joe Mixon these days. Now, what about Kenneth Walker, who is technically the lead back there in Seattle? Are we going to see more Zach Charbonnet, or is Walker still going to lead the way?
Yeah, that's a big question here. And this one, I do worry a little bit about Zach Charbonnet. Like, Dameon Pierce was so bad last year. And look, as a rookie, if you really look at him, yeah, he put up good numbers, but he really wasn't that good. He was just okay. But Zach Charbonnet is actually a good runner, and he showed good signs last year, and we got a whole new coaching staff here. I wouldn't be surprised if it's more of a split. Also, Zach Charbonnet, we know, is the pass-catching running back. And the Seattle offense, not going to be as good as the Houston offense, more than likely. So Kenneth Walker, to me, just continues to be more like a high-end RB2. Like, yeah, he's the RB1 on his team, but I don't think he can reach RB1 status in fantasy.
Well, I'll say if you're in a standard non-PPR league, I think he could. But if you're in any sort of PPR format, yeah, this offense is not going to be geared necessarily towards that pound the ground, like we had with Pete Carroll, a little bit more conservative. They're going to open up this offense. I think Seattle's offense as a whole is better, but mainly the passing game. I think they do try to integrate Charbonnet a little bit more. I love Walker still in best ball on Underdog. I'm drafting him a ton because he's got what you want there. Those spike weeks, that ability to break off those big runs. I think is going to be a little too inconsistent for your taste in fantasy redraft leagues. So I will say that I'm probably not as high on him as I've been the last couple of years, but I'm still okay taking him at a discount if he falls a few picks, maybe even a round after his current ADP. Now, are we going to see a bounce back season from Ramondre Stevenson after what was a very disappointing ending to his year, which ended with injury? Or is this offense just too young, too inexperienced?
No, I think we're going to see a bounce back season from Ramondre. And now they're talking about extending him, which is a great sign, the confidence that the staff has in Ramondre Stevenson. And look, I know they drafted Drake May, but I think we're going to see Jacoby Brissett start the season and probably play most of the season. I don't feel like Drake May was ready to come in day one and be a starting NFL quarterback. And Jacoby Brissett, no, he's nothing special, but he's good enough. We've seen offenses have success with him in the past. We saw it, with the Browns. We saw it last year with the Commanders. He can at least be serviceable, and Ramondre Stevenson is probably going to be the workhorse running back here. I'm not worried about Antonio Gibson. He's a great pass catcher. I think we do see Ramondre Stevenson bounce back in a big way, and it wouldn't surprise me one bit if he's an RB1 by the end of the season.
Yeah, I'm all over Stevenson here at this range. I mean, the fact that they don't have a star quarterback or even a settled situation there quarterback between, when Brissett is starting or when May takes over or whatever happens there, and the fact that they have so many young receivers, that's great for Ramondre because he will be the focal point of this offense. He'll catch a ton of passes. So, yeah, all over a huge bounce back season for Ramondre, and you're getting the kind of late season injury discount as well. And let's face it, there's really no competition for him in that backfield either. Does the same go for Zamir White in the Raiders offense now? A lot of unknowns there. It's not going to be the most dynamic offense, but is it going to run through Zeus?
I think so. Just like we saw at the end of last season, it ran through Zeus. Head coach Antonio Pierce wants to establish it. He wants to run the football. He doesn't even hide the fact. He literally says, I want my running backs to have 20-plus carries every game. Now, he's not going to have 20-plus carries every game. Nobody can handle that. But he's going to get close to that most games, and some games he will go over that. Now, the offense, of course, might not be great this year. In fact, that might be generous. It might be really bad. But just on volume alone, potential touchdown upside, he's going to get the goal line carries. Again, another guy that I think could sneak into RB1 territory. Again, we're talking like RB12-ish, maybe RB11. I don't think he's going to necessarily be a top 10, maybe a top 8 running back, but like a borderline RB1 by season's end, I definitely think is a possibility for Zamir White.
Well, you already know how I feel about this. All over Zamir White. Now, I will say he's probably not going to be up there in full PPR leagues because he's going to be, a little less busy as a receiver than some of these other RBs who are RB1s. But if he scores enough touchdowns, which is possible, it's a team, like you said, with that unsettled quarterback situation, they might not want to even risk throwing it when they're inside the money zone. They might just give it to Zamir White and let him do all the work here. If he's managing to score 12-plus touchdowns, I think there's a chance, at least in a half PPR standard league, he is an RB1 for fantasy. Now, DeAndre Swift is an interesting one. He's going to be the lead back here, but for Chicago now, be completely different offense. Of course, rookie quarterback, new receivers there in tow. What does this mean for Swift, and can he be an RB1 for fantasy?
Yeah, I think it's got to be good for Swift. Look, there was a long stretch last year where it looked like he was going to be an RB1 for fantasy. He might have technically finished as an RB1, I don't know, but certainly down the stretch did not, play as well as he did earlier in the season. But it wasn't like he wasn't as efficient. It wasn't like he got less efficient. The real issue was he just kept getting tackled at like the 1 or 2 yard line, and then Jalen Hurts would take the touchdown. That's not going to happen in Chicago. They're not going to have Caleb Williams do the tush push, their number 1 pick on every, goal line opportunity. He's going to have more touchdowns this year. The offense this is a great offense, right? Skill players everywhere. And with the rookie QB, Caleb Williams, yes, I know he has a cannon. I know he likes to look downfield, but he's a rookie in the NFL. I think he'll take plenty of checkdowns here. I think DeAndre Swift definitely could be an RB1 this year.
Well, despite it not being as good an offense as the Eagles' offense, I think the opportunity might be there, but here's what makes me nervous with Swift. He's still a talented player, a good pass catcher, all of that. But I wonder if this coaching staff is really going to trust him to be anything close to a workhorse, because what we saw last season was this kind of weird committee hot hand approach, couldn't settle on a guy, and we assumed that Swift being there settles it. But from what we've heard in the coaching staff this offseason, it sounds like it might be more of the same. And this isn't an OC situation. They got a new coordinator there. Luke Getsy's out. But I think this is how Eberflus rolls. So I'm worried that Swift won't get as many touches as we really want. And we see Rashawn Johnson, Khalil Herbert, other guys more than we even expect. So I think Swift is a solid RB2, but I don't know if I see RB1 in fantasy. Now, we can't forget about Javonte Williams, still the man there in Denver. Another offense with a rookie quarterback. What does this mean for Javonte?
If you've watched this offseason, you know I like Javonte. I think a big bounce back year incoming for Javonte. Fully healthy from the ACL. Not worried about what the Broncos did at running back. Audric Estime was not a guy I like. I think he's a total plotter running back. Javonte Williams, also an underrated, good pass catcher. But of course, he's in the Broncos offense, which will probably be one of the worst offenses because it's either going to be Jarrett Stidham or the rookie Bo Nix. Probably not going to be one of the best offenses. So I certainly think that caps his ceiling, but I think he's going to get the volume to at least be a good to high-end RB2. RB1 might be a little bit of a stretch, but I think he's going to be a solid RB2.
Yeah, what we need to see from Javonte Williams is how much he is used on third downs, because we saw a lot of Samaje Perine, Jaleel McLaughlin, guys like that catching a ton of passes that didn't go to Javonte. I'm not sure if that'll change this year, but I do know that Javonte should have his best season yet because he'll actually be healthy. And with a young, inexperienced quarterback, either way, they're going to depend on the run game. They're going to depend on running backs catching the ball a lot out of the backfield. Will Javonte be the primary receiver? We'll see about that. I do think high-end RB2, though, is probably his limit. And I already mentioned Devin Singletary was the RB1 in Houston. Now he takes over for Saquon Barkley in the Giants offense. What does that mean for him?
I think it's good for him. I mean, we saw last year what he did down the stretch when he was given the opportunity. But of course, like I mentioned with Joe Mixon, that was the Houston offense. This is the Giants offense. I mean, Saquon Barkley was basically getting 30 touches a game and still was barely giving you RB1 numbers just on volume and the fact that Saquon Barkley is so good. Devin Singletary, yes, the volume is going to be there. He'll probably get chintzy little dump-offs from Daniel Jones. But kind of like Javonte Williams, this offense is going to hold him back. I don't think he has RB1 outcome in his range, but I think he has solid to high-end RB2 outcome in his range, which, look, where he's being drafted, that would be great.
Yeah, this might be your best discount RB1 in terms of starting for his NFL team. But yeah, there's no way that there's the upside to be somebody who really leads your fantasy team to glory. He'll get some volume. He's a good runner, let's face it, but he's not going to be out there on third down as much as you'd like because he's horrible at pass protection. He's just a decent receiver. So Singletary, look, if you're waiting and you need some depth here at running back, I think he's fine. I'm still taking him because I think that he's going much later than I expect. But at the same time, let's just temper expectations here. I think RB15 is pretty much his absolute ceiling. And then you probably already know one of our favorite values here is also the RB1, at least we think, for the Chargers, Gus the Bus. All right, do you think Gus Edwards keeps that title of RB1 for his team?
I do. I know there's a lot of talk, a lot of buzz about Kimani Vidal, and I see the potential there, but I also see the fact that he was, a sixth-round pick, and he played for Troy. So it's not like he was going up against, Power 5 SEC defenses or anything. Gus Bus has been proven in the NFL. He's an efficient runner. Not the most explosive guy, not the best pass catcher, but couldn't he be like this year's version of Raheem Mostert, but like maybe a light version of Raheem Mostert? Obviously not expecting 21 touchdowns, but what if he got to 15 touchdowns? Wouldn't that almost make him an RB1 by default? I mean, as long as he had 800 plus yards, 15 touchdowns, almost makes him an RB1 by default at the end of the season. So, yeah, Gus Edwards, I think, certainly has a chance to do it if he's able to find the end zone like that.
You know what Edwards could be this year? He could be like this year's version of LeGarrette Blount from, it's like a decade ago. Remember when he scored multiple touchdowns, like every week it seemed? Guy who came out of nowhere. Boring veteran, big guy, somebody who you wouldn't even think would be a lead running back for his team. I think that's what Gus Edwards is going to be. Again, not predicting 20 touchdowns here, but hey, a dozen seems very much in play. Don't forget that he's now back with former OC of Baltimore, guy he's familiar with, Greg Roman. It's going to be a very run-heavy offense. So as good as Vidal may or may not be, we know who's the guy who's going to get those short yardage carries. We know who's going to get those goal line carries. it's going to be Gus Edwards. So love his upside, of course, more in a standard as opposed to his PPR league. But man, touchdowns are just so valuable. This guy, I think, out of all the players in this list, might have the most upside. And then maybe the sneakiest RB1 on this list is somebody who you might not even know will be the starter in his team. At least that's what we think. Jerome Ford in Cleveland.
Yeah, and recently we just saw a video where they were interviewing Nick Chubb, and he does not even sound close to being ready, which isn't a big surprise. But also, I didn't really like the way he was talking in this interview. He didn't even sound like a guy who was convinced he was going to play this year. Like, we've heard guys like Breece Hall last year, Saquon Barkley a couple of years ago, even J.K. Dobbins, like, I'm going to be out there week one. I'm going to be out there week one. Nick Chubb talking like a guy who doesn't even know if he's going to play this year. If you can find the video, go back and watch it. You can judge for yourself. But I've talked about it. I don't think we're going to see Nick Chubb at least till midway of the season, maybe even later. And when we do see Nick Chubb, if we do see Nick Chubb, it's going to be a very limited Nick Chubb. We're talking about a 29-year-old running back who just had his second devastating knee injury. So I think Jerome Ford is going to be the RB1 in Cleveland. Now, does that make him an RB1 in fantasy? Probably not, because A, it's Cleveland, and look, unless Joe Flacco is coming back to play, I'm not sure this offense is going to be that great for fantasy. Also, Jerome Ford, he's a good runner, but he's nothing spectacular. He is a good pass catcher, but again, kind of like the Javantes, the Devin Singletaries, I think mid RB2 is about where he will probably settle.
Yeah, look, volume matters, and if Chubb isn't active because he just isn't ready, and Kareem Hunt is gone, thankfully, that was probably one of the most aggravating things of all in fantasy football last year, to see them just sign Kareem Hunt in the middle of the year and vulture touchdown after Jerome Ford did all the heavy lifting. Let's hope that doesn't happen, and if it doesn't, Jerome Ford could wind up being a very sneaky volume monster here in this offense. And even if it isn't the best offense in the world, it's still good enough because you got the running back who's getting the majority of those touches. So Ford is a guy I'm definitely targeting late in underdog drafts, and also a guy that I'm going to try to draft as my backup running back in a lot of redraft leagues this year before everybody else catches on. You definitely want to keep an eye out for those running backs on draft day. Now, as far as receivers, don't worry. We went round by round to tell you all the receivers you should and shouldn't be drafting, and that's right here.